Former Obama White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel suggests a dramatic change for how kids interact with social media. He doesn't want them to interact at all, I guess.
Emanuel, who is mulling over a potential White House bid, says he believes the US should implement a social media ban, similar to the one that you may have heard Australia is rolling out this week. Under that new policy, Australian teens under the age of 16 are not able to hold accounts on social media platforms, and it requires social media companies to take, quote, reasonable steps to ensure children under 16 cannot set up those accounts. The idea is meant to protect children from addiction to the platforms, which experts say can be disastrous to their mental health. The ban has widespread support in Australia. When it was being discussed last year, a YouGov poll showed that roughly 3 out of 4 respondents were in favour of the ban. And Australian officials say it could be the example by which the rest of the world follows, something that Emanuel says should happen as soon as possible. Take a listen.
Australia is banning all TikTok, Instagram, and all social media from kids that are 16 and younger. I think it's time for America to pick up its game and do the same. Look, when it comes to our adolescents, it's either going to be adults or the algorithms. One of them is going to raise the kids. And I think we need to help parents. When it came to taking telephones out of classrooms, we've seen progress. When it came to restricting tobacco from our kids, we've seen progress. When it came to the designated driver, we've seen progress in protecting the safety and the development of our children. So today I'm calling for the United States to follow suit.
In the wake of the rollout, 2 Australia teenagers joined a constitutional challenge to the law, and Reddit is reportedly planning to sue. Critics of that law say the ban will have a disproportionate effect on teens living in remote areas or young people who are disabled or minorities who found online communities through social media. On top of that, several human rights organizations say that a blanket ban is just very unlikely to be effective. Amnesty International told the New York Times, quote, many young people will no doubt find ways to avoid the restrictions. Amnesty International said in a statement on Wednesday, a ban simply means they will continue to be exposed to the same harms, but in secret, leaving them at even greater risk. My number one reaction to this is, okay, Rahm Emanuel, we can't do this here. I think it just so obviously violates the First Amendment that it's not even worth talking about doing. Explain to me how this could possibly be constitutional if banning violent video games from kids under 16. California tried to do that in recent memory, in like 20 years ago. State of California did that, said you couldn't sell violent video games to people under that age. And the Supreme Court said in a decision authored by Antonin Scalia, the conservative on the court, that violent video games are speech. They are like literature. That'd be the same as trying to ban Grimm's fairy tales or something. You can't do that. Parents can restrict them, whatever, but the state can't do it. It's straightforward First Amendment violation. If that's the case, I don't possibly see how social media could be any different. I know there are some harms to teenagers. I fully support classrooms should not have phones. And who is making the argument? I get really annoyed with that. Like, well, so you're saying phones should be? No, of course not. That's preposterous. But the idea that you could, and maybe some kids shouldn't have phones, and that's fine, but that's just got to be for their families to decide. You can't tell me that there could be a 15-year-old who is trying to stay up to date on what's going on in the rest of the world as is getting news and information from TikTok, or what is watching Rising. They're watching Rising on their phone, and you're trying to tell me that should be illegal? It's just so obviously wrong to me, I don't even know where to begin.
So, I'm not, first of all, you've written and spoken a lot about this issue, and what I think you generally consider, though you acknowledge some dangers, you think there's quite a lot of scaremongering around
tremendous amount of
social media.
Well, this is he says TikTok first. These are people, they don't like the information that kids are getting about the Middle East. That's number one complaint of the people who want to ban this.
Yeah, and I mean that would get us down a whole other avenue, but it's this constant thing that it's all the social media platforms' fault rather than the underlying action. But I'm just thinking through your argument about the video games and all of that. Does that apply right across the board? I mean, do young people have a constitutionally protected right to view pornography, for example?
I don't know what the Supreme Court would say. They would say no. They would say that is lurid, prurient content. That can be regulated by, I know it when I see it. The Supreme Court has taken a different view of gross sexual content that no, that can absolutely be regulated. That has been the Supreme Court's view.
Sure.
So, pornography, yes.
But violent video games?
Violence, no.
Okay.
I mean, it can be restricted. It can be. We have the rating system for video games have a rating system.
Right.
Movies have a rating system. There are some things you can do, but to require what age verification of the social media sites? First, also, this is just not going to work.
Right.
Like, there are so many ways around this. It's the idea that you would actually be able to effectively gatekeep young people off of social media, unless you implement truly draconian measures where we have to scan our driver's license or social
birth
security
certificate or
numbers
something. Yeah.
every time you log on, which then creates for the rest of us. Because remember, there's no way to just require this of young people. You're making all of us do this.
Right.
And you're taking away a core function of the internet, which in my view is to protect on some level
Sure.
anonymous speech.
Before, I know we're going to, as always, run out of time here, but before we finish this, I mean, just in terms of the dangers, I'm trying to think if I have the right guy as your nemesis. Is it Jonathan Haidt? You've had quite a few arguments.
Yes.
Now, his argument, I think, is in part that mental and emotional difficulties on the part of teens correlate very closely to the explosion of social media use.
Right.
You think that's factually wrong, or you think from a libertarian perspective that may be right, but it just shouldn't be restricted?
Well, both. I think the data is much less clear on this than the advocates make it seem. There are also other explanations for an explosion in negative self-reported mental health, which is that having negative psychology or victimhood is
more common.
Cool.
It's become
going
cool.
way up. I mean, 60% of Stanford students say they're disabled on their tests. They're mentally disabled, so they get more time. And then also that if you look closely, you see that yes, people who are chronically on social media, young people, young girls who are on Instagram all the time, have much worse mental health outcomes. But that doesn't. To me, that's an argument for limiting theirs or their parents limiting theirs. It's not an argument for taking away people who are using social media in a healthy way and in a productive way. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'd have to, on some level, say that just information is bad for people, which I don't know how you can conclude that in a free society and then don't have the rest of the architecture of your views collapse.
Yeah, I just wonder what we do on the mental health question to the extent that it does exist. But in any event, another topic.
Next up, a report has been released detailing the behavior of Congresswoman Nancy Mace at a South Carolina airport. We'll look at that right after this.